by yet another performance by the Columbus Symphony Orchestra. Recently, I've been writing a series of poems, each of which features a historical event that happened in the year I was born, 1973. The next three poems are from that series. On January 22nd, 1973, the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down by the US Supreme Court. My birthday is exactly 9 months after that, on October 22nd. The poem is titled Choices. It was a Monday, a good day to be conceived, and a good chance I was. At least 50-50, my mother claims. Her wry grin hovers above a glass of Cabernet. In South Columbus, that day was warmer than expected. I imagine my parents leaving Marion Franklin High School together in my father's primer gray 62 Ford Fairlane, windows down. My mother is 16, a sophomore, and laments an early American history exam she didn't study for. My father is bitching about his early morning civics class, one of the few remaining in his senior year. Its tome textbook lying in the back seat. He tunes the car radio to 1230 WCOL AM, where Johnny Rivers belts out some rockin' pneumonia. Maybe they find that empty lot behind Columbus Motor Speedway, toss principles of democracy to the floorboard, and practice the backseat boogie. My mother couldn't explain the vomiting, and her bout with palsy did not ring any bells. She says the term abortion was foreign, such practice unheard of in this matriarchal family. My grandmother, an ordained minister in the Church of God, knew the symptoms, and upon the doctor's confirmation, dictated that her daughter be married before her belly gave away yet another family secret. With that utterance, my mother had no choice in the matter. I have no regrets, she tells me. None at all. This next poem is a persona poem written in the voice of Annie Ali, the girlfriend of Philippe Petit. Petit was the man who walked a tightrope between the Twin Towers in New York. He, Annie, and some friends started planning the stunt, which they called the coup, in 1973. Petit instantly became famous. The epigraph for this poem is from an article in Gothamist. When Philippe Petit finished his illicit walk across the wire he strung between the Twin Towers in 1974, a reporter asked the 24-year-old French street performer why he did it. There is no why, he replied. When I see a beautiful place to put my wire, I cannot resist. The poem is titled After the Coup, Annie Ali to Philippe Petit. The towers were built for me, you said. We who loved you marveled, charmed by your dream to walk among clouds. So you prepared. Closer to earth, you asked us to make the cable dance. Mindful of its middle, soft, treacherous, you said, each day is a work of art, death always so close. For a year we planned, until that gray morning when I watched you from so far below. Your steps measured, the grace in kneeling to salute us all. I cried in that moment with the bystanders, all pointing at the poet conquering the most beautiful of stages. I could not decide if what you had done was a heist, pilfering from the city, its prestige, or if you had helped recapture its crown, its grandeur from that other city, the one with broad shoulders, whose tower gleamed above Lake Michigan. It mattered little, for either way, we witnessed something the world would never see again. Your tryst afterward, the real coup. When the towers fell, I sobbed again for you and for them, the way I wept for us all those years ago, after the wire was taken down. This next poem is dedicated to my brother from another mother, Darren Cordica, who just turned 50 years old last month. The poem is titled Perfection. It's a young man's dream, the one we've grown old enough to concede as unobtainable, unwarranted, except in the year we were born, when Shula and the Dolphins won it all, start to finish, vanquishing what would become your beloved Steelers, who reaped the glory of their immaculate reception the week before. It calls to question the will of the divine, how it reconciles a playful penchant to tinker while still appearing impartial. Did your parents watch Super Bowl VII expecting the same result as you lay warm in your mother's belly? Would my own? It took the NFL 52 years to produce perfection. On the eve of our own half centuries, we accept flawlessness as something only nature can spawn. Hyacinth blossoms perfuming April air, a sun-crisp apple's tart sweetness, its flesh rosy and golden in your hand. Ocean surf pounding Cannon Beach, haystack and the needles black against the Pacific horizon, emerald sea glass awash at your feet. Your son's laughter as he shrugs yet another of your would-be tackles in a friendly backyard game of football. Those moments, between moments, when we relinquish our incessant need to know, succumb to an ineffable impulse to let go. This next poem was published recently in Sheila and the Gig online. Thanks to Haley Mitchell-Haugen and Barbara Sable for selecting it for publication. It's dedicated to Julius Sumner Miller. The poem is titled, Why Is It So? When physics is your business, business can't ever be down, nor can a child's curiosity, especially at age 11, when his body begins to bloom. So he hides away on summer afternoons in his grandparents' bedroom to watch and learn from you on the 19-inch black and white Zenith tuned to PBS. He imagines himself standing with the other boys in the television studio with you, while his grandmother sits in the living room, folding laundry and watching The Young and the Restless on a color console. Her Puritan heart cannot justify her appetites, will not lend her the words to explain her throbbing desire for Victor Newman, nor the ache her grandson feels at any time, all the time. Instead, she prepares his lunch, fried bologna sandwich, small bag of Fritos, and an icy can of Faygo Red Pop. He sits mesmerized by the week's installment of demonstrations in physics, enthralled as much by your enthusiasm and diction as by your experiments, reminding viewers, the experiments I will do are absolutely trivial in their nature, but absolutely profound in their meaning. He does not yet know he will spend a lifetime pondering such a claim. Still, it is your own enchantment that compels him to tune in, that fuels his own longing for learning, and a welcome distraction from those other thoughts about Trinity, the neighbor's granddaughter, how she ducks away with him beneath the ancient honeysuckle bush and shares the fruity smack taste of her lips. He wants to ask you, Professor, about those desires roiling inside him. You are a man and surely felt the same urge, the same unseen force, a kind of magnetism. When you deal with nature, you must make such requirements as she demands, or she will not do what you want done. But neither you nor the ones he loves can tell him where to find the courage to do so. For now, he must settle to sate the other passion you awakened in him, the one that will drive him for years, asking that same question behind all others. This poem is one of 5 just published in the spring 2023 issue of Evening Street Review. Thanks to Barbara Bergman and the editorial staff for accepting my work and producing such a beautiful journal. This poem is titled Gambit. Atop Hogback, you see the UP stretch, its wilderness beyond Marquette, Lake Superior, an open sea of shimmering cobalt and cold cruelty. Where better to best a classmate in a game of chess? This last Saturday, before you defend your thesis and set to proving your father wrong about you leaving a high-paying job that gave you nothing but ambition for something else. This May day, sunlight warms the blossoming north woods. Paper birch forests awaken to an unfolding of possibilities. And neither you nor your opponent are sure of your next move. You should not be still in this game. His skills better than yours, more calculating, more studied. His brow dispels a presumed authority. You breathe the cleanest air you've ever inhaled. Save that ferry ride from Marblehead to Kelly's Island, crossing Lake Erie with your grandparents, who took you and your brother everywhere they journeyed. Both of you nestled into the capped bed of your grandfather's white Chevy pickup truck, loaded with camping gear and a cheap magnetic checkerboard with plastic pieces. The gulls grew raucous, waters calm, enough for you to wander the upper deck and stumble upon two strangers playing an odd game with exotic pieces, astounding moves. You pause, watch, listen. A new lexicon wrapped in the drawl of English accents. En passant, castle, checkmate. A shaking of hands as the defeated departs. The winner invites you to sit down. You explain you do not know how to play. He offers to teach you. Possibilities mesmerize. You envision the kings fat and lazy, the queens nimble and pretty as you make your first move. Soon the lake is memory, hum of ferry engines lost in breeze. Now vanquished, you are ready to shake hands, hike down the mountain. You reflect on the strategy that failed you, weigh the wrong moves and the right ones. You look forward to a stronger king, a wiser queen. You will ask her to marry you, to carry you a while. And she will, and she does, even now. This last poem was published in I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing, Ohio's Appalachian Voices, edited by Carrie. The poem was inspired and is written in response to Hanif's poem, All the White Boys on the East Side Loved Larry Bird. I'm still a Celtics fan and the NBA playoffs are underway. Before I read the poem, I just want to say thanks again to Carrie, Hanif, Wandra, all the folks at Stuart's Opera House, Nico for translating for me tonight, and to everyone who tuned in. Poem is called On the South End Too. We loved him on the South End too, where our parents and grandparents identified with Hickness. They too, born and raised in the whites-only hills of Kentucky, West Virginia, deep hollows where there were no fields for football, baseball, just a utility pole tall enough to nail a piece of plywood, mount a hoop above a patch of gravel and dirt, alongside trailers our relatives still reside in. We loved him because he loved the game. We loved him because when Isaiah offered the olive branch, he accepted it. In my neighborhood, our elders would have broken that branch across their knees, burned it, used it as a switch across our backsides for even thinking about inviting guys like you into their homes. But we knew better, knew the color of a man's skin meant nothing. Only his game mattered. It was the game that bonded us. It was the game that taught us how to be men, to say what you mean what you say, and be ready to back it up. When you lace up the high tops, step onto the asphalt, the concrete, shirts versus skins, and take your opponent one-on-one, hard to the hoop on a July afternoon, he and the sun double teaming you, their breath hot on your bare shoulders. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Chuck, that was wonderful. It was just wonderful. I knew it would be, and it certainly was. I, for one, am so excited to hear about this new collection, and I can't wait to hear. And I want to remind you all, you can find out more about Chuck at chucksalmons.com. And so I know when this new book is ready for publication, he will let us know, and he'll keep us all informed on social media and on his website, so that we can buy that new book when it comes out, because it's just going to be absolutely marvelous. So thank you so, so much for sharing with us tonight, Chuck. It's just so good to hear you read. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Concrete Wink here in a little while. So let's look forward to that. Wandra Chang is the National Book Award nominated author of Sanju, her debut novel, which is listed in the 100 Best Indie Books of 2021 by Kirkus Reviews. Wandra was extensively featured in San Antonio Express News and San Antonio Report. She was featured author of 2021 San Antonio Book Festival and the June 2021 featured author of the Big Texas Read. My goodness, Wandra. Born in South Korea, Wandra has lived in the U.S. since 1970. Her writing discipline began at age 10. Listen to this, writing 5 short stories a day under the tutelage of a writing teacher. She won first place in a province-wide in-person writing competition, and her short story was published in Jejon Ilbo, the daily newspaper of Cheongnam Province. And I'm probably completely destroying these names, but maybe Wandra will help me out a little bit when she comes to us. She studied journalism at Ewha Women's University in Seoul, Korea. And she currently lives in San Antonio, Texas with her husband, Bernard. And I have to tell you, for the first time in many years since I've been doing this show, I am featuring a writer that I do not personally know. However, I love her writing. I love her book so much. And I know all of you here at Spoken and Heard are going to love it too. So I'm so happy to have her with us tonight. You can buy Sanju from Madville Publishing. I also know she's working on a new book as well. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Wandra Chang. Wandra? We just need for you to turn on your mic and turn on your video. And it's in the bottom left side of, there we go, there you are. And then you're also your mic. If you could turn on your mic.
That's
it. We got you. You go now. You turned your mic back off. Try again. Wandra, your mic is there we go. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, hello everybody. Thank you. I'm thanking everyone here who is participating in this, and my fellow panelists, Chuck and Hanif. I am going to read, my book cover looks like this. And for ease of reading, I'm going to read from my iPad. So I will read the first chapter of Sonju. So this is the beginning. Oh, I forgot about my description. As Carrie said, I'm from Korea. So as you can imagine, as you can guess, I look like an Asian. I am short. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm wearing dark gray dress. My hair is dark with some gray and small eyes. And I don't know, what else do I need to tell you? But anyway, I'm glad to be here. For those of you who can see me, I don't know what else to say about me. So I'll start reading. Seoul, 1946. At the sight of the two tall Americans in military uniforms walking ahead of her toward the Korean Central Administration building, Sonju's heart beat a little faster. A month after America dropped atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, one of her Japanese classmates in high school came to her house to say goodbye, and they had cried together. That was well over a year ago. Sonju took another glance at the broad backs of the Americans before she turned left to cross the cobblestone boulevard. She tightened her grip on the thinking stone in her gloved hand and hurried, swallowing the dry November air that scraped her throat, puffing white smoke with each breath. The eighth house from the corner, a newly whitewashed traditional house, Misu had told her. After a fourth knock, the varnished wooden gate opened halfway, and a young maid's cocked head appeared. I'm your mistress's friend, Sonju said. The maid opened the gate to let her in, and Sonju marched into the courtyard and on toward the living quarters. The maid dashed by Sonju, craned her neck toward the living room, and announced in an urgent tone, "You have a visitor, ma'am." Misu opened the frosted glass door, and her face lit up like the first flower in spring. "Ah, it's you." Sonju hooked her arm into Sonju's and walked toward the room, her long satin dress whispering with each step she took. In Misu's marriage room, everything was new and shiny. Freshly varnished paper floor, a double wardrobe against one wall, next to it neatly stacked floor pillows, and on another wall, 3 works of blue and white porcelain pottery displayed on a low credenza. One of them cradled Misu's thinking stone like a prized jewel. Sonju smiled and touched the stone in her pocket. Hongu, Misu, and Sonju each had picked a small flat stone at a church garden when they were still in elementary school and called them thinking stones. Sonju took off her coat and gloves. As she lowered herself to a floor pillow, she glanced at the embroidered flowers on Misu's pink skirt, then briefly dropped her gaze to her own gray wool underskirt. "You are glowing, Misu. Mary suits you well." Misu's small cherry lips turned up and her thin eyes twinkled. She quit smiling and studied Sonju's face. "Something's wrong. Tell me." After a slow sip of hot roasted barley tea, Sonju said, "This morning, my mother announced that my sister is promised in marriage. The wedding is in April. She said her daughters will not marry out of order." She ran her fingers over the pillow's piping until it turned the corner. I'm not ready yet. When will you be ready? You're almost 20. You're keeping track of my years too? Sonju winced inwardly at her own shrill voice, and this time said in a softer tone, I want to marry Kongu. Then she asked, what do I do? Misu's brow jumped up. Marry Kongu? She sighed as if weary and said, we should have stopped seeing him when we started middle school. There is a good reason why boys and girls are separated at that age. Sonju wanted to say something just as condescending, but said, but we didn't. The three of us swore lifelong friendship on the thinking stones. I told you I wasn't going to quit my friendship with Kongu just because I reached the age of 12. We were lucky we didn't get caught with him. But marriage? Miss shook her head. Surely you have better sense. Better sense? Sonju took a long breath and said to herself, patience, patience. I also told you if you had been born into a family like his, I would still be your best friend. Sonju watched Misu chew on her lower lip for a while and said, Misu, it's my life to live, not my mother's, not anyone else's. The choice should be mine. Unlike our parents, we received a modern education, not that staid Confucian philosophy. For years, we talked about living a modern life. You and Kongu did. It was a mistake to come. Crushed, Sonju tried again. Kongu and I understand each other. There are things we want to do. We'll be equal partners in marriage, having equal voice. How can I give him up? Misu's head moved side to side. Your parents will never approve. Sonju had resisted her mother's push for marriage for almost 2 years already. 1 more year is all I need, she said. By that time, Kongu will have graduated and secured employment. We can get married then, even if I have to elope. It wasn't as though she hadn't thought about leaving home for a year. But where would she go? How would she support herself? Misu said, you can't elope. What would you do? What would that do to your family? Sonju wanted to argue what not marrying Kongu would do to her, but said, I came here to see if you can help me come up with an idea to dissuade my mother. She rose to leave. Sonju had no choice now but to plead with her mother. Early the next morning, Sonju knelt on the floor across from her mother in her traditional Korean clothes with her hair pulled in a tight knot held at the nape with a lavender jade hairpin. She looked at her impeccably dressed mother and marveled at how alike they looked, with big features on square face, yet so different in their temperaments and outlooks. Her mother was studying a ledger at her low table, sitting tall, mouth firmly closed, her gaze straight on the ledger and not stirring. Sonju's heart thumped at the thought of what she was about to ask this steely, disciplined woman who was so contained that not a drop of blood would rise on her skin at the prick of a needle. When she was 5, Sonju discovered that not all mothers were like hers. She had gone to Misu's house and saw Misu's mother combing her daughter's hair, all the while talking in a soft, tender voice. After she was done, she cupped Misu's face and smiled. Back at home, a comb in her hand, Sonju had asked her mother to comb her hair. Her mother stared at the comb, then at her with a look of scorn. That was the moment her 5-year-old heart crumbled. She lowered her head and retreated to her room like a scolded dog. She decided then not to ever need her mother. Now she had to plead with this same mother to wait one more year. Forgive me, mother, I need to tell you something. Her mother slowly raised her head, lifted her chin, and glanced down at Sonju. After a quiet big breath, then again, and once more, Sonju swallowed hard and took one more deep breath. I want to wait a year, then marry a Seoul National University student I know. Her own voice roared in her ears. Did she say those words correctly? She took another big quiet breath, like an animal confronted by a predator. Sonju kept her body still and waited for her mother to pounce. After a long silence, her mother asked, How do you know this man? I have known him since I was 7. Why haven't you told me about him? Because I knew you would not approve. Why would I not approve? He is fatherless and poor. Her mother kept her eyes on her. Sonju knew what that meant. She would have to say more. Her stomach coiled with each stifled breath. He and his mother live at his uncle's house. Her mother continued to stare. Sonju buckled. His uncle is a merchant. Then you know you cannot marry this man. From now on, you will not leave the house unaccompanied. Sonju leaned forward. I will not be happy with anyone else. He will graduate in a year. He'll be successful, you will see. Let me wait, mother, please. Have you shamed our family? No, mother. Instantly, she knew she had made a mistake. Yes would have forced her mother to reconsider. Her future with so much promise was now wiped out. Her body went limp and her fingers had no grip left. Her mother slammed the ledger closed. We are done with this conversation. Sonju shivered at her mother's last words as if a slab of ice had been thrown at her. Soon the heat of seething anger surged up to her neck. I hate her, she said to herself as she retreated to her room. If only she had said yes, it could have changed her life. Her mother began to meet with marriage brokers and after only 6 days had a prospect, an engineering student at Seoul National. You have a viewing in 4 days, her mother came into her room and told her. His family is well established in Chungnam province. Why are you rushing so? The sooner the better, the farther away the better. Sonju realized her mother meant to banish her. A torrent of sobs broke out. She cried into her hands, her arms pressed to her chest and breathing. The next minute, she heard her mother rise and leave the room. A whoosh of cold air rushed in and slapped her back. In spite of telling herself all those years that she didn't need her mother, her wrenching reaction told her otherwise. She was powerless. She cried in shame until she was exhausted. The following morning, her father called her to the men's quarters and said, The engineering student is a good prospect for you. The marriage broker told your mother that he comes from a progressive family. You should be happy with him. Her father had spoken. Back in her room, she sat leaning on the wall and stared blankly with not even a fingertip moving. Beyond her window, one bright orange persimmon hung on a leafless branch. A brown bird flew over and perched. The persimmon fell. Sonju knew what fate waited for her. It was the same for all women once they married. Submission to her husband and his family. Submission. She was familiar with it. During 5th grade, in front of the whole class, her Japanese teacher had struck her open palms with a bamboo stick for speaking Korean instead of Japanese. 2 quick strikes, sharp and hot. When she tried closing her hands, her fingers curled only halfway. She bit down on her lip and willed herself not to show tears. On the way to her seat, she saw her Korean classmates lower their eyes as she passed by. A lump came up in her throat. Back in her chair, she sat tall with steady eyes on the teacher and her chin out in defiance. Below her desk, her hand furiously rubbed the thinking stone in her pocket, and she felt every angry nerve of the rising welts on her palms. She wanted to remember that pain. She wanted to remember that anger. That semester, going forward, she outperformed all the Japanese students in her class in every subject taught. Disproving the Japanese superiority was easier than finding a way to defy her mother. But thinking back, she had, in fact, defied her mother for many years without her mother knowing. There was a walled church garden with a long wooden bench under a tree. She and Misu had found it one afternoon after school when they drifted away some distance from home. The place was quiet with rarely anyone passing through other than a smiling yellow-haired priest. The brick paved ground was always swept up, and every season different flowers bloomed and lush green plants crowded under evergreen shrubs. One day, a boy showed up. He came almost every day, so the three became friends. He was 1 year older and helped Sonju and Misu with their homework. They played games and chatted before going home. That was the happiest part of our day. On the day of Sonju's viewing, her mother entered the room, ignored Sonju's puffy eyes, and made her change into a traditional Korean dress. She said, "You'll marry this man. His family owns extensive farmland, and all the sons received university educations." After her mother left her room, Sonju tried not to cry. She started counting instead, while she paced occasionally tripped on her long skirt. Before she reached 4,000, her mother called for her. Sonju entered her mother's room and sat with her heavy, puffy eyes downcast. She felt the student's mother watch her every move. The woman told her to turn her face this way and that, as if to study some merchandise. Afterwards, she nodded in approval toward Sonju's mother. Back in her room, Sonju sat in the corner, farthest from the door, and rocked back and forth. How would she live without Kongu in her life? All her future dreams and plans included Kongu. She closed her eyes, saw his face when he was 8, and every smile and every gesture since that time. She saw his long fingers, broad forehead, and generous mouth, and his eyes that conveyed his thoughts and feelings without words. She could hear his calm voice, his slow release of the first word in a sentence, and his soft laughter. She loved him so. Her dreams and plans had started long before. One day, she saw her Japanese classmates look at an open page of a magazine and giggle. When she asked if she might look at it, one of them told her to get a copy herself and pointed to the further right. She found a cramped used bookstore on 3 blocks away from school, where a small middle-aged man greeted her in poor Japanese. She grabbed a magazine with a photograph of a gathering American people. In the foreground was a smiling boy looking at a girl adoringly. The following page showed pictures of boys and girls dancing. They looked carefree and happy. She told herself her future could be like that. On the 6th day after the viewing, her parents announced her marriage date. February 25th, 2 days before she would turn 20. She retreated to the corner of her room and whimpered like a beaten animal. She locked herself in her room and refused to join her sister and brother at mealtime, so a maid placed a tray of food at her door. She recalled her first awakening of love for a boy. She was 15. She was with Kongo sitting on the church bench. She pointed to an article in a Japanese magazine, waited until he finished it. Did you read the part that Americans choose their own marriage partner? He nodded. What an idea, she said, grinning. In that case, I choose you, Kongo, as my marriage partner. Then he surprised her by saying, I choose you, Sonju, as my marriage partner. Then they looked at each other and blushed. On the way home that day, she bit down a smile, hugging herself to contain her joy. As days, weeks, and months passed, her imagination soared. On one particular night, she watched the moonlight through her window and imagined herself standing in its low glow in a lush green somewhere. Kongo moved toward her with the scent of a gentle breeze of early summer air. She went to him. There, where the white flower petals glistened like silver, he gazed into her eyes and embraced her. Every night, she visited the same images again and again, folding her arms in an embrace while imagining Kongo's arms around her. She woke from a reverie when her younger brother's high-pitched voice rang from the courtyard. So, mother, my sister's husband's family grows rice trees. Husband? Sonju sat straight up and heard her mother snort and say, rice doesn't come from trees. It is a grass. You have eaten rice 3 meals a day your whole life, and you didn't even know where it comes from. Sonju squeezed a thinking stone and watched her knuckles turn white. So this concludes the end of the chapter. Thank you for listening.
Oh, Wandra, thank you so much. And your book is just so delightful. And I think everyone can tell from this very first chapter, you are setting us up for quite some adventure. And we fall in love with Senju. We love that she's brave, and we just know in our hearts that she's going to find a way to prevail, or we hope so, don't we? So thank you so much for this lovely book. And I know you're working on a second book. We'll talk a little bit about that when we have our Q&A time, but thank you again for coming to us tonight. I want to remind everybody that they can buy the book from Madville Publishing. You can find that online, a wonderful a small press out of the Texas area, I do believe. I think that's right. I could be wrong. But Madville Publishing, and I know the publisher's here tonight. Pardon me?
Madville is near Dallas.
Dallas. Okay, wonderful. All right. And I know Kim joined us tonight. We're happy to have her, the publisher at Madville. And we're lucky to have her here this evening as well. So all best of luck to you, Wandra. Thank you so very much. Okay, we have one more marvelous reader with us this evening. And we've all been waiting, I know, to also hear from him. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio, and we are so proud to claim him. His poetry has been published in Muzzle, Vinyl, Pen American, and various other journals. His essays and music criticism have been published in The Fader, Pitchfork, The New Yorker, The New York Times. His full-length poetry collection, The Crown Ain't Worth Much, was released in June 2016 from Button Poetry. It was named a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Book Prize and was nominated for a Hurston Wright Legacy Award. His first collection of essays, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, was released in winter 2017 by $2 Radio and was named a Book of the Year by BuzzFeed, Esquire, NPR, Oprah Magazine, Paste, CBC, the Los Angeles Review, Pitchfork, and the Chicago Tribune, among others. He released Go Ahead in the Rain, Notes to a Tribe Called Quest with the University of Texas Press in February of 2019. The book became a New York Times bestseller, was a finalist for the Kirkus Prize, and was longlisted for the National Book Award. His second collection of poems, A Fortune for Your Disaster, was released in 2019 by Tin House and won the 2020 Lenore Marshall Prize. In 2021, he released the book A Little Devil in America with Random House, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Penn Diamondstein Spielvogel Award for the Art of the Essay. The book won the 2022 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction and the Gordon Byrne Prize. Hanif is a graduate of Beechcroft High School in Columbus, I believe. I met Hanif just after the Crown Ain't Worth Much came out, and it was such a sensation. And even then, Hanif was a huge success. And I was new to the poetry scene, an unknown. He was the headliner the night we were all at an event that I was also going to read at. And I happened to be seated next to him. And I'll tell you now, I was shaking in my boots, as they say, at the prospect of standing up in front of that audience and reading. And let's face it, I'm sitting next door to a rock star, just saying. And long story short, I think Hanif sensed my agony and was so kind to me and talked to me and helped put me somewhat at ease. And that's the kind of human being Hanif is. It doesn't matter how famous he becomes, and he is, he just remains the most humble person you'd ever want to meet. And you can learn more about him at his website at aduraquib.com and find all of his books there. And I am just beyond excited to welcome Hanif Aduraquib to Spoken and Heard.
Thank you for that, Carrie. And thanks to Chuck and Wanda, and it's been beautiful to sit and hear your words tonight. And thanks to everyone who's joined. I am going to go through my work kind of without much preface. I'm just going to kind of read through the poems because I think that's my rhythm during virtual readings. That's kind of my rhythm. And I'd like to thank the translators too for doing the work of making this reading accessible for everyone tonight. And so, yeah, I'm going to begin with two poems that have the same title that are prompted by the TLC song No Scrubs. So they're both called No Scrubs. No Scrubs. What kills you isn't always, oh, wait, I forgot to do an image description. I am a Black man wearing a black hoodie, black beard, and black hair. My backdrop is a floral bit of wallpaper, and I'm sitting at a moderately lit kitchen table as my dog joins for a moment. Okay, no scrubs. What kills you isn't always what kills you. Just ask the bones scrolled underneath miles of desert. Just ask the warped light the eyes believe to be a river, and then ask thirst. A holy book sent you here, but you can't remember which one. Promised land in every language, and a fire you must take your turn with so that you might arrive there. When there was nowhere for me to sleep, I walked the night, which stretched thin as ribbons of sugar in the hands of a child struck by wonder. With no land promised, one only travels towards deception or disaster, and I choose both. I lie about what it takes to survive a long night. Even now, I don't tell the full story about beauty, the child rolling ants into sugar just to watch them suffer, pull themselves apart with their stretching for freedom. The earlier you introduce death to the world, the earlier you understand you won't live forever. If you get bored of playing God, there will always be another instrument. Survive enough dreamless nights and your reward will be a past you can fold, small enough to fit in a jewelry box, lit with a lamp and set off to sea before morning. The box will find the land it was promised before any of us do. Don't believe the papers. I will die of wandering. No scrubs. Woefully unprepared for the world's newest undressing, I hang two hands out the passenger while heavy clouds draw a knife along the sky's throat and the roads beg to be slid upon, death be damned. I ride shotgun in any machine that will hold my heart while it writhes like a snake pulled from its resting place, cursing the distance between a mouth and a target. Shotgun, named after who might sit close to someone who holds something precious and fire off a weapon to protect a person they did not love, but could be convinced to kill in the name of. And beneath the percussion of a fingers quivering along a trigger's vicious grin is something I believe to be not far from love. I am not a killer, but there are those who I would kill for, and the kingdom of heaven has a home for that kind of devotion. The only God I pray to understands loyalty in this sense, a commitment to undoing what might undo you, a halo of dark birds circling a hunting dog at the end of a hungry and shadeless season, the dog slowly surrendering to the heat and the heat itself, which arrives to settle a score and never leaves, laughs at our sighs thrown into the ever-thickening darkness. I was once foolish enough to think myself among the birds and never among the dying. I say, I know I was fly, and I mean, I believe the weapon that would be the end of me had not been invented yet. The roads, wet and damned to death, I swear, if I love you, or if I have loved you, or if I have ever heard a song, or watched a moon twirl into a blood-red gown and thought of your name, or if you have been dead for so long that I can remember your laugh, but not your voice, if I have to conduct a symphony of your once living sounds that now run through the cracks in my fingers like vengeful wind, even then, I swear, I am beside you and reaching a hand across the flimsy partitions between this world and whatever world comes after. Try to holler into the expanse of terror along the road between apocalypse and aftermath. See what echoes back. Memory is the home you earn until you can't anymore. I whisper my mother's name into my cupped hands in every room I enter. Everywhere is my mother's house. The title of this poem is also the poem's first line, as these things sometimes go. In all of my dreams, the words "I love you" sound like they are being spoken underwater. The interviewer asks if I have come to any new conclusions about the Titanic. I think dying afraid is treason against your lone, cherished life, a disaster of terrible hours masked by occasional miracle. But I'm speaking for myself, I say. I want time to fall in love with my endings before I take their hand. A halo of orange stains my cheek, a smattering of lipstick before a door closes and never opens again. I look up and it is dark before I can ask forgiveness for not loving the occasional miracle of light. At the dawn of his dying, a man told me it wasn't the entirety of his living that flashed before him, only the softest, prettiest moment on an endless loop in every dream. And he said to wake up from that each morning and still be here was another kind of death. The interviewer asks if I know how to swim. I cannot see the water from where I live, so I don't believe it can touch me. The story is there were people aboard the ship who would have survived if they believed the ship was sinking, invincible beings on an invincible vessel. But I ask, who is in charge of setting the distance between knowing you will die and not wanting to? From far enough out, it is impossible to tell where the sky ends and the water begins, a child might say, a finger hanging over the sand-struck edge of the world. And what strange architecture, the illusion between heavens. Darkness, Mother's darkness, which mother's myth. Any good executioner knows this. An iceberg finds paradise in the yawning black, its bladed edges looking perhaps from afar like stars strung across another doorway to another unromantic night. The interviewer asked if I know how to swim. I love the thrill of waking from a nightmare, evicted from the hell of my mind's own making and thrown back, gasping into a moment of gratitude, thin as the thread that barricades a door between love and anguish. A half minute to praise the hauntings, the illusions that would rather me dead, but would you believe the bed is still empty despite the good news? I apologize to the absence until I envy my dead pal, who died a new death each morning when he was torn from his long gone beloved, who, in his dream, danced with him in their first house and sung, "Darling, you send me, I know you send me," into his ear. And I have not loved anyone enough to want to run, screaming their name through God's hallways. I haven't loved anyone who visits me while I sleep and die again. The interviewer has my hand in their hand now, and they ask me if I'd like to learn. They tell me it's only as cold as I imagine it to be. I'm sorry, I'm always doing this. We began somewhere else. I know we are here to talk about drowning, but what if we never find each other in the afterlife? If we arrive with a memory of love, a sweetness that took its leave upon our earthly exit, what if, even in heaven, we are meant to wander, lonely as an iceberg floating between a lie and the truth? Wouldn't you want to stay a little longer? The child standing on the shoreline understands this, means to say there is no difference between the suffering. Heaven, another kind of drowning. I would be among those who are called disbelievers. I would find a place to watch the sky while the ship curled upward like a wicked grin. I need a moment to fall in love with my endings. I know it will be over soon. Forgive me for holding on. I am too afraid there is nothing on the other side. God fashions a door and you spend an eternity walking through only to find another door. God invents an echo of longing for all of us in the end. The interviewer asks if I know the flowers I've been holding are dead. When I look down, I wake up. A parade of rose petals spiral from under my tongue, each one covered in ice. All the TV shows are about cops. Leadbelly wrote a tune to the mayor and sang his way out the joint, but not before some motherfucker with a death wish took a knife across Leadbelly's neck and almost got carried out in a box. But there ain't too many ways to leave a cage, though. And I suppose if you got the kind of trouble that won't walk you out, then you got to chase after what made those boys on the outside fear you in the first place. And I think of this when I am deciding what to make of the scene where the cop sits in the back of the blues club and goes limp, collapses into the red leather of a lonely corner booth. The right singer can make any blues song a cage, where the only way out is a procession of black cars and black suits. The cop weeps into his palms while a singer unfurls a song about a man who's marching towards a bullet or the edge of a knife. And I think the trick is that we are supposed to believe this architect of death can recognize the shape of what's coming, that a heart hums beneath the shined up metal. The best blues songs are sung by liars and then make liars of listeners, make mayors believe in changed men who sing with blades dancing beneath their tongues. The song, like the blade itself, an instrument of both dissection and reconstruction, depending on the hands, depending on the intention of the composer. What am I to believe the cop knows of a violence this tender, even as he trembles, even as he folds into his own loneliness like a note pleading for mercy passed through bars? I am going to read one more poem, and much like the one a couple poems earlier, this poem's title is also the first line. Watching the notorious B.I.G.'s funeral procession for the 17th time, I can't help but notice the white wings of the dove and its aimless twirling above the black whips pouring slow down the block, and the wrists occasionally flung from their tinted windows, white diamonds ascending towards the off-white sky, and in a moment, no longer than the exit of a half-drawn breath, The dove finds itself above a car with its trunk open and overrun with a chorus of soft white roses, and it is here, I swear, I cannot tell where the feathers end and the petals begin, to say nothing of the clouds, which, in this joyous exhale of a second, are delighting in the marriage of all this fluorescent white, high stepping down the aisles and locking fingers with the smoke blown from the mouths of Black folks, bouncing atop the cop cars and shaking the fences of the check cashing spot. There are the graves we do not dance upon, but they are certainly not these. And there are the two Black boys dangling out of a high-rise window, their mouths open and dark as solar systems, their hands pointing in awe at this confluence of small and clumsy heavens, stumbling towards one another, perhaps as in awe as I am now, or as I was then, when the dope boys came back to the block in summer, and their white car doors flung towards the sky, a fleet of divine hunting birds lined up along the basketball courts, Biggie's voice pummeling the wall of humid air. The song says, somebody gotta die, but doesn't say who, doesn't say where, doesn't name the street people will push their closed fists into while the wheels of a hearse stumble along a plague of potholes. The song suggests death as necessity. Be grateful there is still enough earth to be buried under and a set of hands that might love you enough to do the digging. The casket weighs the same no matter who rests inside of it. I propose that death itself is the weight, which is what you might say to me now to make sense of why I cannot lift the box that holds what is left of your ashes, but easily raised you on my shoulders when we were young and light as feathers, stretching up towards the branches and taking what we could from abandoned nests. Thank y'all so much.
Well, I can hardly say a word after all that. Oh my goodness, Hanif. It's always just such a pleasure to read your work, but then to hear you actually speak it is really something else. And I love every bit of it. And wow. I'm a little bit speechless, so I think I'm not even going to try. I'm going to just thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I would like to invite everyone to turn on their mics and their video now. And this is the time in which I take questions. If the audience has questions, I'm glad to take questions from you all, or I always prepare questions. So here's your chance. Those of you who are attending tonight, you get a chance to ask questions if you'd like. And I will start things out and do my questions. Excuse me, my allergies are just killing me tonight. So you'll have to pardon me. So, all right, I will start the questions and then I'll watch the chat and the Q&A. Maybe Adam can help me do that too, so I don't miss anybody. Let me check real quick that there's nothing there. Okay, so here are my questions. Chuck, I thought it'd be really nice if you tell folks more about Concrete Wink, because it's such an unusual, in a sense, trio, and I love the back and forth that you all do. So I think people would love to hear about that.
Well, my good friends Sandy Feen and Ricky Santer, a number of years ago, we were sitting around lamenting that we all at some point in our lives had wanted to be part of a rock and roll band. But we knew, we were too old for that at that point, and not to mention the fact that none of us played any instruments. So we thought, well, it'd be kind of cool if we, got together and formed a little, poetry trio. I won't call us necessarily a power trio, but we, poetry trio. And, the dream was to just gig around Ohio and parts beyond Ohio's borders, possibly in a little, Volkswagen microbus. So we just started doing it. We sat around, we came up with the name. I still don't remember how we came up with the name. But ever since then, we've done it. We've gigged in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana. We just had a gig earlier this month down in Cincinnati, which was a blast. That was the first one we had done in months. And we're like siblings, you know. I never had any sisters. I have only brothers. And so I kind of think of Sandy and Ricky as sisters, and we just have a lot of respect for each other and a lot of love for each other. And the gigs aren't always paying, but we don't necessarily care. We just really enjoy doing it. And so the readings are always in 3 parts. And so each part has a theme to it. The third part is always attitude, because our tagline is poetry with a hefty trowel of attitude. But in each of those parts, we each read 3 or maybe 4 poems that have some sort of connection to whatever the theme is for that part. And you know, we just want to entertain people, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So that's kind of how it all came together.
I love that. And I've had the pleasure of hearing them, and they are a hoot. Sometimes their poems speak to one another, whether intentionally or not, but they do, and they play off each other, and it's a pretty fun evening. So you can reach Concrete Wink through Chuck's website as well. And if you'd love to invite them to come and read for you sometime. So something to look forward to. Wandra, if I'd like to ask you a question next, if I may. So I was reading that you are in the beginning stages of a new book. Is that right?
Well, I finished the rough draft. Let me put it that way.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about that? What we can expect, or is it top secret?
No, it's not. You know, when I wrote Sonju, I was learning how to write, because I'm learning also in English. It had been a long time since I wrote. So, you know, there are rules like any other field. I'm a psychotherapist, so there are rules, and we have rules in our writing. So it took a while for me to get into the groove of writing, sort of. So after I finished this, I thought, I'm about to be 77. So I don't know how many books are ahead of me. So I decided what I want to do is push myself and tackle a more difficult writing. So my next book is going to be very character driven. So, you know, I asked the reader to live in their head, sort of. So it was much harder for me. It might not be hard for other people, but it was harder for me. And I learned something from writing Sonju. At the beginning, it was 150,000 word novel, and I think we shrunk it down to 87.5 or something. And I cut out about 10 years. So every time I cut and paste from one section to another, I had to make sure the season fits right, the place fits right, and all of that stuff for 22 years. I follow her for 22 years. So this time, there are 3 main characters, all in first person, and it happens over 5 days.
Oh, wow.
5 days, and it's going to be less than 200 pages, I think. Yeah, because I mean, I love good, excellent short books, and there are so many, you know. So I don't feel bad about being short. It's at about 56,000 words. So I had some of the readers read, got feedback. That's what I do. I don't go to workshops. I don't go to critic groups. So I had them read, and then I go above, and somebody who is much more attuned to writing books. So I send it to them. And then the next level, by the end of the month, I'm hoping to send to 2 very experienced writers I know. And then I'll work on that afterwards, and we'll see what happens after that.
Exciting. Well, we have that to look forward to, and I'm sure you'll keep us surprised on your website as well, where that's all going, so that we can keep up with you.
Yeah. I haven't written much on website recently, but I'll try. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you, Wanda. It's been wonderful, wonderful having you. And I'm excited for your new book.
Thank you.
And it says, oh, someone says, I love the idea of tasking yourself with a novel under 200 pages. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to write more than less, really. It is. And I, as a poet, I firmly believe that. You word people astound me. And then let's see, we have one more question for Hanif, of course. And like I said, he is so humble. And when I went looking for his bio, he had written nothing about his MacArthur Fellowship grant. The man received a MacArthur Fellowship grant, which is just stunning and wonderful and exciting. And I thought, Hanif, if you would kind of tell us, I know that you sort of have a project that goes with that, I think, something that you offer by way of service or thought or your presence. So anyway, I wondered if you could share with us what happens when someone gets a MacArthur Fellowship grant, or what happened to you when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, you actually don't have to do anything. You can. The idea is that it gives you more time and space to work on whatever your craft is. But the other side to that is, you become kind of more in demand in a way, and so it makes it hard for you to have the time to do your work. And so for me, mostly, it's just been kind of attempting to expand what I've always done, which is, to write my books, but also uplift other writers, spend time in high schools in Columbus. If this is a way for me to make time to do the things I want to do, then a lot of that will be defined by what I can do in the city for the communities and the city that I'm tapped into. And one of those big ones is particularly Columbus City school writers. And so, there's that, but I also just, I think that it's something that it's great when it happens, of course, but I after the kind of immediate buzz dies down, I think the best advice I got from a poet who had won it before me was kind of just, well, now the task is to get to work and get back to work and continue doing the work that got you recognized, because you don't really set out to win something like that. You don't apply for it. You just kind of do your work, keep your head down and do your work. And that's been my practice, and it's been good to kind of continue in that.
Wonderful. And I had heard you were working with schools and around Columbus, and that's why I thought you had a project. But I'm not at all surprised to hear that that you're using the option of having this extra funding to give to others. That doesn't surprise me to hear that you're doing that, Hanif. So I think that's quite wonderful. Mm-hmm. And you certainly don't make a big deal of it, but it is a big deal. The MacArthur Grant is an amazing award and so well deserved. So congratulations on that. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I just want to know, before we go, anybody want to talk about, we talked with Wander about what's next. We kind of talked with Hanif about what he's doing next. And Chuck is working on a book as well. And I thought, this is kind of a cliche, but sometimes we talk about who our latest favorite writer or poet is. Is anybody anxious to do that, to put in a word for somebody they know that's writing and maybe could... Chuck has his hand up that says, do you have someone that you'd like to?
Well, I'm a huge Hanif fan as well. And when Carrie asked me to be like part of this reading, I was intimidated. Like, you want me to be on stage or even a virtual stage with Hanif? Because, Hanif, you were one of my favorite writers. And my question is, when is Object of Sound coming back? Because I'm like itching for new episodes. Is that coming soon?
We don't know. I mean, we're still kind of up in it may not come back is the bad news, but we're trying to find a new home for it. It was housed by Sonos, and Sonos is no longer housing it. And so we're trying now, like actually today I just had a call. We're trying to find a new home for it because I think it's a vital resource. I think it's a way that people have discovered music, and it's a place where Object Sound is a podcast for folks listening who might not know. It's a place where musicians can come to have their craft taken seriously, which is a big goal of mine. And so the fingers crossed, it will be back before the end of the year. But we're kind of in the process of trying to find a new partner to put it out, which is promising. I mean, there are a lot of people interested, but it's also kind of like, we don't want to change the show. Like, I don't want to change the format of the show. I would like to keep it as it is. So there's that. But thank you, Chuck. You know, I'm a big fan of yours, and it's a real joy to get to read with you, and hope to get to see you soon. And just like immense gratitude for all the work you do at OPA, you know, and the resource that OPA is for a lot of folks. And just the wonderful community that's been built through it. Yeah.
I agree.
I love listening. Sorry, I love listening to that podcast. Like when I go for my walks, it's like, oh, is there a new episode for me to listen to? It's like that's what I always look forward to listen to. So fingers crossed for more episodes of Object of Sound.
Yeah, and I love what Hanif said, Chuck. You took a floundering poetry society in the state of Ohio, and your leadership helped completely turn it around and build it into something impressive and astounding, and the membership has grown tenfold, and it's been just something to behold. So thank you, as Hanif said, thank you so much for that work. You've changed and helped to mold so many lives. So thank you very much for that. So Wandra, any ideas of writers you'd like to throw out there, or an opportunity for folks, or anything like that tonight before we go?
I belong to quite a few writers organizations in San Antonio. And the main one is called Gemini Inc. Actually, the executive director is on the chat here, and she's a poet. She loves your poetry, Hanif and Chuck. Anyway, what I would like to say is my publisher is here, Kim Davis. She represents a lot of good writers, really high quality writers. So I would like people to check on that website and see what you might put it on your list to read. And I think here's I think I saw one of the writers, Susan Underwood, and her book is wonderful. So please check her out too, as well.
I agree. Susan Underwood is a fabulous writer. I agree. Kim Davis is telling us that she's putting out a new Motown poetry anthology, and I'm putting that up on the chat. But again, contact Madville Publishing. For those of you who are going to stream this later, just go to the Madville website to find out about that, about submitting work, focused around the Motown movement and Motown music, and folks involved there. And the Gemini link is geminilink.org for those of you listening and or listening later, if you would like to check that out as well.
Right, Gemini Inc.
Inc. Thank you. Gemini Inc. You're right. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes Gemini Inc. invites nationally acknowledged poets and writers, and we have a big event.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Anything else before we leave this evening? Anything upcoming that people need to know about? Okay. All right. Well, I gave you everybody's website so you can keep in touch with them and see what they personally are up to. If you want to catch up with Chuck or Hanif or Wandra, I want to thank the three of you so much for joining me tonight. I certainly want to thank Adam and everyone at Stuart's Opera House and all of you who came to visit tonight and all of those you who will listen later. I'm looking forward to, like I said, this is the last one of the season. So next fall, we'll start again in September. We'll have September, October, November, and it's going to be anthology series for the fall. So we're going to start out with, let me say this, the Dolly Parton anthology is going to be on tap for September. We'll do the Women of Appalachia Project's Women Speak in October, and in November, we will read from the book that Chuck mentioned, I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing. And I think you're going to just love getting to know these folks. This is a lot of Appalachian work, and but people from all over the country. So I want to thank you all for joining in this evening. I want to, of course, thank our marvelous ASL interpreters, Joe and Nico. And I want to tell everyone, hey, stay happy and safe and have a wonderful summer. And good night, everybody. I'll see you all in the fall.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Let me